had the opportunity to borrow the 017 for a couple of months. So that was my first experience with an actual Soyuz mic. So I was using it for the Not Pop album. So I was doing all of these recordings of my voice. I chopped up all of the musical voice clips into a format that I could prop up into the OPZ and perform my whole set on the OPZ with Soyuz recorded vocals.
I'm David Brown, and this is the Soyuz Podcast. Dating back to 2009, Andreas Paleologos, better known as the lovable synth guru Cuckoo, began uploading videos to his current YouTube page. What started off as mostly dance videos and clips from his live shows eventually morphed into one of the most popular synth tutorial channels, amassing over 20 million views. He's most known for doing demos of noteworthy synth models, but also releases his own original music and has been a user of Soyuz mics since 2019. I'll be talking to Cuckoo today about a variety of topics, from his early days as a composer to how he made his channel a full-time occupation, and his thoughts on all things synthesizer related. Hi, Cuckoo. How's it going, man?
Yeah, it's going well. It's good to see you again.
I've heard your name came about in the mid-2000s because your regular name was too hard for people to say or spell. Is that true?
Yeah, well, I it's not like I made a poll or anything, like who can spell my surname, but I just felt like every time growing up with the name Paleologos and not living in Greece, where everyone could spell it, I had to spell it out every time. So I felt like Andreas Paleologos, nobody will remember or be able to even search that. So I drew from my roots. Every summer I spent on Crete Island with my dad growing up. And he had a friend who had a really nice bar called Cuckoo, the Cuckoo Bar. And when I was a kid growing up, my dad used to run restaurants and sometimes bars. And whenever he was wrapping up work, like late night, maybe like 1 o'clock at night, doing everything, the accounting, and taking us kids for a walk, far too late for us kids to go for a walk after midnight. And he said hi to everyone in the like touristy streets. And then we ended up at Cuckoo Bar a lot of times, far too young to end up in such a place. But every other place had like techno music and dance music and popular, radio dance music. But Cuckoo Bar, Yanis, who was the manager of the bar, he opted for much nicer, cozier. Yeah, it was like probably Egyptian jazz, and it was calypso. It was totally unrelated to what was fashionable and hot back then in the 90s or 80s and 90s, I'd say. And so I always felt like coming there was like an oasis of music and getting to know something completely different. And growing up, I was always very musically receptive. Like music hit me hit me really hard. So listening to music at Cuckoo Bar represented like something different and something very nice. So
I'm so glad to finally have that mystery solved, because I actually always wondered, like, it's such a great name and it actually suits you so well in a way. Maybe it's just because I've always known you as that, but yeah, that's a beautiful story.
Thanks. And now I kind of carry the heritage in secret of the Cuckoo Bar, and they're both gone now, my father and Yanis, a long time ago. The bar kind of continued for a couple of not generations, but iterations and someone else took over the name and took it to another village or a city in Crete Island. But last time I was there, I tried to see if it was still around, but it was closed. So I think I'm the true Cuckoo now.
Yes, and thus the name of your channel, True Cuckoo. You most definitely are the true Cuckoo. Prior to your YouTube channel, you were a composer in the 2000s, whether for children's series like, I'm going to mispronounce this, Like, or PC games like, forgive me, Big Flugplan med Mule Mek.
Yeah.
What were you doing in the 80s and 90s that sent you on that path?
Yeah, good questions. Lykke, that means happiness in Norwegian. And I was animating that. I used to work as an animator, as full-time job. And when the animation, it was like a two-man team. We made 10 episodes. I did the animation and music, and my colleague Ingvild, she made the story and direction. And the other one, Big Flygplan med Mulle Mek, it's like based on a kid's book, build aircraft with Mulle Mek. It's a name. And I didn't do the music there, did I can't actually remember. I was animator and like 2D artist. The designer for the 2D art. But and that was like animation and game design in the middle there. But growing up, I played a lot of video games, and I was dreaming about making video games. And I was watching not a lot of animation and cartoons, I'd say. We didn't have any fancy TV networks. We had like 2 channels, and they only showed animation like once a week or something. Not like today where you could just overload and drown. But growing up, I was like, animation, that was so important to me. Animation, video games, and music, those were kind of my 3.
And skateboarding, if I'm not
And
mistaken.
skateboarding,
Yeah.
Not super hardcore, but yeah, skateboarding. I was an active
You
kid.
had some skills, man. I've seen you even, busting some kick flips not that long ago.
Yeah.
You also worked as a visual artist and animator on children's shows, comic books, and art installations. How did you get involved in such projects?
When I first started working, like my first job as a, 19-year-old, I started working with what was then called multimedia, which is now a retired word, which with animation and interactive content, and online started to take shape then, and we started to make interactive content online. And then I applied for on composition music at university. I was not accepted and started working instead. And then a couple of years later, or 2 years later, I applied at the Art University for animation and was accepted. So sometimes it's like, you need to just follow up on what's being given to you. And animation was the first university where I was accepted. So it was only natural for me to take that step. But afterwards, I think I did a lot of like music videos for friends, and we managed to raise some budget for it. Not much, but enough to keep me going. But I think I took it to a much more interesting place where I started to make like real-time visuals for contemporary music, which I was doing for a couple of years here in Norway after I moved here. And I was always thinking, looking at the jazz musicians and contemporary musicians in awe, thinking like they can take it such a turn in any time and just throw everything on its side and take a new direction. And I wanted to kind of match that with visuals. And so I developed a sort of half produced a visual thing where I could also, whenever I wanted, make illustrations in real time. I was doing a lot of that digitally, but I very quickly realized that I wanted to do it under the camera. So I created a sort of a loop solution where I could, whenever I wanted to loop anything I did under the camera, I could prepare like transparent films where I draw on and like move them so that I couldn't see my hands, make a loop of that, and then make another loop on top of that and make kind of layered loops, and then kind of fade in a pre-animated video layer and kind of match the music in real time.
Very cool.
Yeah, that was
I think you may have answered the next question. Well, not really. It says, what was it like attending Konstfack in the 90s, the Swedish University for Arts and Crafts? Is that the...
Yeah. I mean, animation was the newest faculty at the Konstfack, and it was in its infancy, kind of. So when I started, it had a 1-year course, and I took that course. And after that year, I was working at the university as like amanuensis, an assisting teacher with no teacher background. But I was kind of working there, trying to help them digitize the animation tools to make it more efficient. But it was still like hand-drawn animation and handmade animation. And then a couple of years later, I came back because they'd initiated the second year. So I really wanted to get back in the university. Took the second year and did the same thing again. I worked there for another year afterwards. It was, I think, going to the university is a time where you, especially when you're young, you can just go heads on, full on, be 100% nerd in whatever it is you want to do there. And I wasn't the kind of guy to just sit down and wait for my assignments and then do the assignments and then go home. I lived there. I was there day and night at the university. Did all the stuff I could. I loved it.
Oh, this is an interesting one. I wanted to ask you this. What took you to Norway in 2005, and why did you relocate there from Sweden?
I grew up in Norrköping, which is a medium-sized town in Sweden. It's a nice town, but it's not like Stockholm or any like big city with lots of offerings in terms of creative outlets. At least back then. Now it's getting there. But at some point, I had a girlfriend from Oslo, and I was thinking, I've had like long distance relations before, and it never really worked out. So yeah, let's just move there. Not on a whim, but I decided quite early that, let's move there and see, give it a really good shot.
For a girl, that's like the best reason.
Yeah. And that was 2005. And 1st of April, April Fool's Day.
Wow.
And then, I stayed there. And it was in Oslo where I kind of grew up, matured in my freelance and creativity. And there's so many opportunities opening up after I moved here. So after we broke up, like 3 years later, Oslo was my town, and I stayed, and now I have a family here. So now I'm going to stay.
Yeah, I mean, when I visited you there, it definitely seemed like, it was your town for sure. From what you said in the past, there was a point in the 2010s where you intended to quit music. So you made a song called Goodbye for your channel, but it got so many positive comments that you changed your mind.
It is true, and it's still out there to relive that video. And I made an album, like my first full album, and I thought, like, this is going to be the thing. I worked really hard, and released it. Nothing happened. Nobody cared about that album. Nobody knew about me. So, I mean, in retrospect, it was to be expected. But then, you're into it and like, why doesn't anyone find this? Why doesn't anyone listen to it? And then YouTube, I started to do some stuff on YouTube. But at some point, I felt like, I think maybe I should just quit music, let the musicians, professionals do their stuff, and I'll stick to animation. And at some point, it was just around that time that I made that video, which was actually an expression of how I felt. And It's Time to Say Goodbye was the song.
And ironically, it was the catalyst for you not to say goodbye.
Yeah, it was. But also, I think I learned something there. Like when you're lowering all your facets or everything that you might have built up around you to kind of shield yourself from who you really are, where you just let everything down, you're fully vulnerable, you just show how you feel for real. And then that's when you start communicating and people relate to. And I think that was what happened there. And maybe it was also a little reminder for me to just be more of myself. Of course, you can amplify yourself, but just, tell the real stories, convey the real emotions.
Absolutely. I mean, that's, I've often said that I think that the highest duty maybe or potential opportunity for art and music and literature and all of the various ways we have to express ourselves is to help other people feel less alone in the world. And I think that's only possible when you do open up in the way that you just described. Instead of, we, like you said, we build up this story of ourselves and how things should go and expectations and all of this and ego. There's always ego and fear behind it. And unless we can strip that away, it's very difficult for that pure energy to come through. Yeah. Is it true that one of your OP1 videos is what helped boost the popularity of your channel?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe not like a specific one, but many of them. I think around the time when the OP1 came out was... I caught like word of the OP1 being in development, and I was hyping myself up for maybe 2 years prior to the release. So when it came out, instantly bought it, and it kind of changed. I mean, it's kind of cliche to say it changed the way I make music or it changed everything, but it changed something. It brought some sort of joy back into making music that maybe I hadn't had for a while, I think. And that joy definitely transferred into my videos, and I just loved fiddling with it and explaining how I did stuff. And at some point, I realized that maybe I'm actually making some sort of tutorials here without really realizing. Because I just like to explain to people, help people out, and tell them how stuff works.
It's an amazing device. I mean, I unlike you, I'm somebody who's very technically challenged when it comes to actually learning how to correctly use something like a synthesizer or a sequencer or a drum machine or anything. But from a design perspective, it's absolutely beautiful. It's just an iconic design. And for me, that's very important. Like, if something's a physical object, something that you need to interact with in this 3D world that we live in, it's so important that it reflect the spirit of what it is or what it's intended to do. And obviously Teenage Engineering are fantastic designers.
Yeah. Okay. I think maybe I'd put Jesper, the lead designer and CEO, I put him up there as one of the top industrial designers of the modern age.
I would agree.
Up there with Joni Ive and maybe other names that I don't know, but It's
Yeah, I would
fantastic.
agree. I had a meeting with him. Oh God, when was it? I wonder if it was on the same trip when I visited you in Oslo. It was probably around the same time, maybe
Yeah, I think so.
2018, something like that. I think you were the one that actually introduced me to him, and
Yeah, I sent a few emails.
yeah, and we had a nice lunch, and it was back when I was developing the Tula Mic, and I think the Tula Mic at that time was literally a cigarette pack that I had shaped into the shape of a Tula and covered with tin foil, like aluminum
Yeah.
foil. So it was in its real infancy, and yeah, he gave me a lot of great advice, and no, I respect them a lot as a company. So you quit your day job around 2016 and now run your channel full time?
Yes, that is correct. I made my last animated short, which was a lot of work. We tried to raise funding for kind of employing a little team, maybe a team of 5-6 people, but we ended up we couldn't reach the numbers we wanted. So I was in this position where I had to think, okay, either we scrap the projects now, or I do everything myself. And I did everything myself, and I kind of burnt out a little bit from animation, and it was a good timing also with my YouTube channel that had gained enough popularity that I could kind of start, with the help of Patreon, start running it full time.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you did. It's a great channel.
Thanks.
Your entry into electronic music seems to have come by way of video games like the Sega Mega Drive and computers like the Amiga. Can you talk about the influence of those units and how much their sound influences your current music?
Yeah, sure. I was, as I told you before, like I loved video games as a kid. I still do, but not to the same extent. It takes a lot of time, especially modern video games. They're huge, so you need to dedicate even more time today with games. But back then, I grew up at the same time as video games kind of caught on and started to get better and better. And the Sega Mega Drive was special to me because of the sound. The sound chip that it's using was a kind of rudimentary design Yamaha in the spirit of the DX7, so an FM synth chip that just sounded totally alien and really cool, but it was much more limited than the DX7, which is more kind of crisp and precise. But that sound, just from the first time I heard it, I was, without even reflecting on that it's a synthesizer in there, I just felt like, whoa, the sound is so cool. What an incredible soundtracks. And some friends of mine, we sometimes challenge each other, like trying to play the tunes that we heard in the games on the piano. Like, oh, which game is this? Listen to this, and had kind of a little challenge and a fun music game. And yeah, having that in the back of my head, at some point I got the Amiga Tracker, a music program for making music. And yeah, that was probably the first time I started making real music on the computer. Some friends of mine were also into gaming, and another friend, he was a programmer, so we made a little team and started to make some little games, homebrew games, just for the fun of it. But yeah, fast forwarding to when I started to make my own music. Yeah, it's definitely, it's around the time when you define something very core in yourself. It's
Right.
probably in your teenage years.
It
And that
definitely.
stays.
It
And it
really does.
influences.
It's like
Yeah.
when you're that age, everything enters you so completely. And on the one side, it's incredible and it's inspiring. On the other side, it's kind of painful sometimes. But I agree completely. It informs what you do for the rest of your life. You know, in my case, I've written a million songs about Los Angeles in the 80s, you know, like, it's just when it comes to reviewing new synths, how do you go about making sense of them without reading the manual? Do you not read manuals?
Very rarely, almost never.
I love
I mean, if you know a couple of synthesizers and machines, you understand the concepts, and then the concepts are it's kind of the same or similar in most synths. It's just how do they present them all. But sometimes something comes along that is a little bit different, or maybe it doesn't have a good screen, so it doesn't present much information on the screen. And then I quickly check out the manual. Especially digital manuals with search function.
Right.
That's the best.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I have a question, a side note. Have you ever heard of a company called SOMA?
Yeah, sure.
The owner and I guess he's the main creator of their products, Vlad Kreimer, is somebody who I have great respect for and who really had an enormous effect on a couple of products that I developed, the launcher being one of them.
Yeah.
We worked for 2 years on that thing and were unable to achieve the sound I was looking for.
Yeah.
And just by chance, we happened to be testing the fifth or sixth iteration of it in the studio in Moscow, and he happened to be there to show us something he'd been working on. And again, I rejected it. I said, it doesn't sound right. And he came up to me and he said, I know what you're looking for and I know how to get it. And we sent him the schematics and he made certain suggestions that were absolutely the key to achieve what we were trying to achieve. And he did the same thing with the Tula Mic. The Tula Mic was not sounding the way I wanted it to. And I said, Vlad, can I hire you to help with this? And he's like, David, I'm really busy, man. I can't, but send me what you have. I'll see what I can do. And same thing. He made a few key suggestions that were just the key, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I remember the Tula where you were probably after you've been in contact with him and he made his changes, where you then were kind of impressed by how good it could sound. Yeah. Because prior to that, it probably didn't sound very good.
It did not. Prior to
but now you came out like, it's actually incredible how it sounds now, even if it's another type of technology than you're usually.
It was a huge relief, let me tell you.
Yeah.
I've heard that another part of your work is beta testing on new products and sending feedback to new developers. I can say that for sure from personal experience. How did that come about and what sorts of developers have you worked with?
That is something I do whenever I have a connection with a company that I like personally. I'm not very professional because I always let like a personal emotions maybe come first. So if there is a company or some people working with something, I just like these people, we have a good connection. And if I'm then also hyped about what they're developing, it's sometimes the case that I can join in early on and be a beta tester. And it's very rare. No, it's always unpaid work, beta testing. I mean, there is internal beta testing within the company to a certain point, and then it's external beta testing where they reach out to a select group of people, maybe depending on the size and scope of the project. But like with Teenage Engineering, I've been beta testing the OPZ and the OP1 field And also I've been beta testing some software updates before they go live. And yeah, with the OP1 field, I think I was, at least they told me so, I was the first external tester. It was actually before the beta period. And yeah, and then a couple of months later, we grew as an external beta team. Maybe around 20 or 30 external testers or so.
Wow. Yeah, it must require a lot of testing before releasing something that complex.
Yeah, and I'm just one person, so it's very. I need to select where I direct my time, because I can't do everything, and sometimes I get approached by a lot of people, and I just have to turn a lot of stuff down because I don't have the time to do everything. But even if it's like really cool stuff.
Yeah, no, you definitely keep a busy schedule. As someone who's reviewed countless synths, what have you found to be the biggest differences between modern synth companies of the last 13 years and previous companies of the 80s through the 2000s? Are you seeing anything novel in the new designs that is groundbreaking?
I think the future holds a lot of promise. And one thing that teenage engineering has shown is that completing the package with a brilliant user interface and a user experience is something that can be done now with modern programming and modern user interfaces and modern graphics on screens and stuff. And I think they're real experts on I wouldn't say dumbing down, but like compressing the user experience into something very, very efficient and concise. And I think that's something that is currently groundbreaking. I'd say not everyone is up to standards, but the ones that stand out, they have like really, really great user experiences, user interfaces. But sound-wise, I think maybe on a general note, we have lost something over the years. Stuff is becoming more and more refined and more precise in terms of audio rendition. It's so digital, everything. And even analog circuitry today tends to be overly precise. And maybe there's something getting lost in there. But I don't have much old gear. I just have like the Sega Mega Drive synth called the Mega FM, which has the same chip from the Sega Mega Drive. It's actually that chip. It's not being emulated. It's the real deal. And it instantly has that vibe, that imprecise. It's taking a lot of space. It's just going into the room and just says, hello, I'm here. And I'm something rather than just a rendition of something. And I think one thing that I really, really look forward to that I think is holding a lot of promise is physical modeling. I think that is something I would like to see more of in modern synthesizers. And yeah.
Yeah, I agree that we live in an age right now where there is so much precision, so much high definition, so many almost limitless options that I see it with a lot of young people. Like my daughter suddenly one day started pulling out these old point and shoot cameras that had been sitting in the drawer for 20 years and, started taking photos with that. Or my son started using like film disposable cameras. And I think that at a certain point, the soul yearns for a level of imprecision and a level of, what's the word? Like randomness, maybe, like that some of the old circuitry and things like that could provide.
The microphones that you work with, you are using older technologies, right?
Absolutely.
But you're kind of modernizing maybe the manufacturing?
No, actually,
No?
not like it. Okay, we can talk about Soyuz a little bit. My
Yeah.
whole idea with this podcast is to not have it be like an infomercial, but
Oh, yeah.
you are definitely a great supporter of the brand, and the concept behind the mics are that they not be copies of anything. They're not like because that's a whole other thing. Like,
Yeah.
but B, that they are made in the old way. So virtually all of our microphones are made on manual lathes by master machinists. And in Russia, a master machinist is a guy who's essentially gone to the University of Machining. And they literally have, it's like a Super Bowl of machinists every year in Russia, where they get like the most hot shit machinists from all the different factories all over Russia, and they put them all in one big place with all the same lathes, give them all the same drawings, and then they all have the same amount of time to machine something. And then one guy is crowned like, king machinist of Russia. So they have a level of expertise that is just unreal. And it's my understanding that with capsules specifically, it's a kind of a dark art. Like, logically, you would think that, a CNC machine, a modern CNC machine, should be able to do better what used to be done by people. But it's seemingly not the case. Having a very, very well-made and finely tuned manual lathe that's operated by a high-level machinist is going to give you a better result than a CNC lathe. That's probably controversial. If it is, let me know in the comments. But that's been my understanding, and that's what we do. We have one lathe that we had to fly our machinists 3 times to the town where they made them to test it, because they can't guarantee that level of accuracy.
Yeah.
The first 2 didn't make the grade. The third one did, and that is the only one that we use for cutting capsules. Yeah. So back to what you were talking about, this missing thing, I think that it's very real, and I think that people appreciate it, and that's what we try to pack into our mics.
Yeah, it's also every time I design sound packs and like synth patches, I'm always trying to search for that specific little sizzle or presence or identity, and give the sounds a real character. And it's always the sum of many small combinations, and to find that precise balance. That's
that somebody once told me that the human ear is capable of identifying literally millions of variations in a given sound. And that's, why babies can recognize their mother's voice in amongst thousands of other voices. So that being said, like with microphones, for example, you can discuss high frequencies, low frequencies, mids, EQ curves, all these things. But at the end of the day, the way that we decide on the final version of a mic is we get our engineers to make 5 versions, sometimes 10 versions. Then we go into the studio and test them, and then just listen, because it's what you said. Like, no one knows exactly what's going to end up with that sound that you're looking for, with that thing that moves something inside of you, and anyway, I think it's I'm glad that we're of a like mind. This episode is brought to you by Soyuz microphones. At Soyuz, we make microphones the old-fashioned way. Everything from R&D, machining, assembly, and testing are done in-house by our own team of specialists. Our mics are known for having the Soyuz sound. Lows that are deep but not boomy, mids that are present but never boxy, and highs that are open and airy without sounding harsh. Soyuz mics have become known as true modern classics. Click the link in the description for more information, or to find a dealer near you. Are there any software instruments you wish were turned into a hardware unit?
I'm a big fan of a company called Plogue. It's a French Canadian small company, and they're real experts on emulating older chips, and they're doing it so well. So they preserve that little special sizzle of in a real accurate way, much more accurate than any other thing I've heard. And I would love them to make something hardware, but selling a software, it just duplicates itself. There is no, I mean, it takes a lot of time to develop, but once it's developed, it doesn't cost anything to sell a new unit. But making hardware is a lot of risk.
Oh God, I can attest to that.
Yeah,
hardware's hard. That's what they say. So that's okay. So Plug, is that what it's called?
Yeah, Plug,
Plug.
Plogue. Yeah.
Okay, we'll put a link in the description.
Yeah,
and I'm curious to check that out. Okay.
So yeah, that's the first thing that comes to mind. Other than that, I don't know.
So it's been 3 years since your Not Pop album. With your channel so popular, how are you able to balance reviewing synths with releasing your own music?
Well, a short answer would be that I'm not able to balance it, but I'm trying. I think all of my music projects, mostly, they are. It's like a project. It's coming from a live set. Every time, if like now, I'm right where I'm starting to feel like, yeah, I should make a new live set. So the next time I perform, I want a new live set. And when I start developing that live set, it will turn into something that I'm then later on thinking, well, maybe I should actually record this and make an album of it. But yeah, in terms of balancing that with videos, I feel like I can make anything that I'm working on into a video. So if I'm making an album, I can make the process of making that album a couple of videos. If I'm making a live set, same thing there. And also if I'm learning something new that I'm excited about, I can make that into a couple of videos. So recently, the Expressive Osmos came out, and it's a really special instrument. And I still haven't made a tutorial. I made a long video, but no tutorial. But I think maybe I should sit down with that and design a couple of sounds myself. It's a pretty complex sound engine, and make a tutorial on that. And
by the way, sorry to cut you off.
Yeah.
I watched one of your Between the videos recently, and I really enjoyed it. And it reminded me of what you said earlier about opening up and letting people share these inner questions and conflicts that you experience as a human being.
Yeah, thanks. I was about to mention it when we talked about it, and because there's something happening when I started making these Between the videos, a couple of, I'm on number 7 now, because I'm always shooting them when I'm in a kind of not distressed state, but somewhere in between projects. I don't really know what to do. Maybe I'm a little bit frustrated. I'm not really ready with stuff that I would like to be ready with, and not fully there to shoot another video. And then, okay, let's make a video and talk about how I feel right now. And the first time I made it, I felt like I was not sure if I was going to release that video, because it felt like, I don't know, this is too private, or maybe too, who am I to say all these things? Why would people care? But I released it, and then it turns out those kinds of videos, maybe they won't catch the most amount of views, but definitely the most amount of connection. I could see in the comments that people really respond to that and care about it. And it's a little bit the same thing that happened with that goodbye video with the OP1. Like people really care and relate.
Yeah, I noticed in the comments that people seem genuinely grateful for it. And I think that things like that are so important now more than ever in a way, because with social media, people present this curated version of their lives. And then we compare our lives to the curated version of someone else's life and think, God, I'm really a worthless piece of shit. Like, I wake up in the middle of the night and just think I can't, and look at that person's just doing great, So going back to the bit about making people feel less alone in the world, I think something like a Between the Videos video makes people go, oh, wow, Cuckoo, who, is this incredible creative guy who makes these great videos. Even he has these moments of where he's not inspired and he doesn't know what to do next. And, I want to ask you about your mirror, because I love your lo-fi, low-tech solution to your face within a video. And I'm wondering if that's an original idea or if you took it from somewhere, or how did it come about?
It's an original idea that just popped out of necessity. It was one day I was shooting a video. Also, it was kind of in between the videos state, and I had the OP1. It was a shitty day. I felt like shit, and I had a shitty camera. I was thinking, oh, maybe I should shoot a video. I don't have time to set up a nice kind of layout or anything. Just put the camera there. It was a really bad table, looked shit. And I think like I had a little pocket mirror lying around. I just put it next to it, thinking like, how can I get my face into the shot? Because if I zoom out, it's too big, and then the synth is too small. And I put a little mirror in there just by chance. I had it lying around and felt like, yeah, that's a good idea. And then I can zoom in even further and still have my face there. That's great. So it became a kind of a visual logistics kind of solution based, but it quickly became something I really enjoyed. Also, I like these lo-fi solutions where there's no technology involved. It's just a mirror and it's there. Because it becomes more true, it's becoming more relatable, more easier to connect to. And you just need to turn off any face recognition autofocus.
Right.
It's always going to see the face.
That's funny. Well, it's a brilliant thing. I love it. Something else I wanted to ask you about was back when I visited you in Oslo, I think it was 2018, we took a really pleasant walk. You took me to that amazing sculpture garden. We walked down by the port, and neither of us could have imagined how different the world would be in a few years. And I think back sometimes to these moments pre-March 2020, let's say, when, I don't know, that it's almost as if there was an innocence, there was a stability that I'm not sure we're ever going to really feel again. It's not really a question. I just would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think probably most people will live through some sort of big change, but maybe that was a big change that affected everyone in the world, whether you were living in a developed country, in a not that developed country, and everyone was reminded of something. It could be good and bad. It could further that kind of it could push people away from each other. It could also get people closer to each other. It was a time. Yeah, when I think about the time before that, sure, it was maybe more innocent and spontaneous. But then again, turn time back 20 years, you could say the same thing.
Yeah.
It was much more innocent prior to the internet.
Oh, God, yes.
Yeah. Prior to the telephones, prior to the televisions. And there's probably a lot of these. And now, today, prior to AI, well, there's going to be like a lot of stuff.
It's a fascinating time to be alive, because I think if you push it back even farther, if you go back 100 or 200 years, a person's life would have been virtually identical to their grandparents' life, if they were farmers or if they were, whatever, like pre-industrial revolution, like from generation to generation, things didn't really change that much. And we are living in a period of exponential development by the end of our lives, I'm not sure the world will even necessarily be recognizable.
No.
That said, it's a very interesting time to be alive and to experience it. And I think, I was saying this to my son the other day, I think that during times like this, art in general, music, literature, it's even more important. People need it more than ever because they feel untethered.
Yeah, that's true. And also, I think right now with the birth of widespread AI technology, I think it's a reminder, it's a challenge to us artists and creators that the AI is telling us and challenging us, like, all right, we can do this now. What can you do? And it's kind of asking me to really, okay, I can't be a slacker anymore. I can't just wiggle my way through it. I need to really define what it is, what it means to be a human, what it means to be a human artist, and not just a parrot or to copycat anything. And I'm not afraid of it. I'm kind of I'm here for the challenge.
Yeah, I am too. I agree completely. I think that AI, no doubt, is an incredible thing, and I think in many ways I'm glad we're on this subject, by the way, because I think it's impossible to avoid in 2023.
Yeah.
But I think that it is most likely just sort of the next phase in the evolutionary process. And I read a book a long time ago called What Technology Wants. And one of the main points it was trying to make was that there's no difference between technological evolution and biological evolution, that one is an extension of the other. And I have this kind of obsession, I've had it for years, that maybe it's going to be a good thing. Maybe AIs will have our best traits, our poetic traits, our empathetic traits, but they won't have the parts of us that are kind of left over from the caveman days when, you needed to be able to murder somebody, and, maybe they'll be better than we are. Maybe they won't want to destroy us. Maybe they'll think we're really cute, and love us in a way. Maybe they'll have the same questions we have. Who created all this? What exists way out there? Maybe they'll be able to go way out there and check it out,
Yeah.
So I'm with you. I'm not afraid of it. I'm not opposed to it. I think that it's what's happening, and I also think that there are things that are uniquely human, and that as artists, it's our job to channel whatever that is and to celebrate that. Maybe this is the fading of this period of consciousness, and it needs to be celebrated and documented. And what does your current studio setup look like? Do you have an overflow of synths because of the work you do with your channel?
Yeah, my studio, I've designed my studio not to be a music only studio, but to be an open studio for creative work. So I don't have everything out at all times. I have a cupboard designed myself with a lot of synths and equipment. Far too many cameras and these two pianos here.
I see an una corda in the background.
Yeah, I love it. I could turn on let's see, I could actually turn on the sound from it. I muted it. There we should. Oops, here.
Wow, Cuckoo, I'm a huge fan of your piano playing. Whenever you play piano in your videos, there's something kind of fin de siècle. I'm probably mispronouncing that, but like kind of Eric Satie-esque, just
thanks.
Very romantic and melancholy. It's just my kind of stuff. But I love it.
I really appreciate it. I think I was about to mention Eric Satie just a moment ago. When we were talking about what it was like back in time, because when you hear his songs, they're timeless. But if I was reminded of it because a pianist friend of mine, Norway, she's a great creator. She made a video on Eric Satie and mentioned that, at the same time that he wrote these pieces, other composers sounded like this. And it's like, oh, that's right. He's not from the 20th century. Oh, that's right. He's actually from the 19th century. Because he was so disconnected from everything else going on in the music scene. Everything else sounded like romantics and, Tchaikovsky and maybe late, like big orchestral, massive stuff. And then here comes Satie making this very melancholic, almost kind of jazzy, like 100 years before jazz, or maybe not 100, but yeah.
Yeah, he captures for me this. I think since I was a kid, maybe because I grew up in like a bad part of Los Angeles, and kind of felt somewhat constantly under threat. I always had this desire for like a cozy corner of the galaxy, this. And that his music sounds like that. It sounds like this place of repose. In a chaotic world, and your playing reminds me of that as well. It really does.
I think it's a combination of my musical core and also my playing ability, because I'm not a pianist. I'm not a trained pianist, so there's a limit to what I can accomplish, like physically.
Sometimes that can be great.
Yeah. So I need to find a balance there between playing my music, but I need to keep it simple enough so that I can play it. But I would love to actually write piano pieces for someone else to play, where I can maybe go a couple of steps forward where I couldn't keep up with the techniques required. But I really enjoy playing like serene, simple, and that stuff, melodic.
What Soyuz mics have you been making use of in your videos and music making?
I've used 3 mics. The first time I came in contact with Soyuz was at an electronic music fair, and I was walking past the mic stand with Soyuz a couple of times. They were trying to get me to come listen to it, but I was kind of in my electronic music space, and I don't have time for that now. But then I gave it a shot, listened to the music, to the microphones, and the one that caught my attention much more than all of the other mics was the 017, probably the Tube, and that was on display at the at the fair, and it sounded so incredibly. It had that quality that we were speaking about earlier. That it had a character from what I could hear from the noisy convention hall. It captured my voice in a way that I hadn't heard in any other microphones that I've tried. It's not that I've tried every microphone, but I've tried a fair deal of microphones, and every time I come up with, I have to do a lot of little tweaks on the EQ, and then it turns out maybe I'm ruining the sound rather than helping it. So, but with this one, I felt like, wow, this has something special. It's a glistening, sizzling tone somewhere in there. The mumbling frequencies are managed, and mumbling is not taking over that with some of the other microphones. So that was definitely my not a wake up call, but like a hello, we are Soyuz, we sound like this. And I was, I'm here for it. Wow, now I have a favorite microphone company. Wow, cool. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. And then I had the opportunity to borrow the 017 for a couple of months. So that was my first experience with an actual Soyuz mic. So I was using it for the Not Pop album, but maybe not in the way that you would think with conventional music production, because it wasn't an album at the time. It was a live set. So I was doing all of these recordings of my voice for the little synthesizer, the OPZ. So all of these, I chopped up all of the musical voice clips into a format that I could prop up into the OPZ and perform my whole set on the OPZ with Soyuz recorded vocals.
That's great.
And it sounded really good. And then it is one of the pricier microphones that you offer, so I couldn't really afford to buy it at the time. But then later on, I bought the 013 FET microphones, and those have been my go-to microphones for anything acoustic, especially like pianos and other things too, but mostly pianos and voice recordings too for YouTube. But then fast forward to last year, and the 1973 came out, which has, to my ears, maybe a little bit more modern sound, but still very affordable. And still that Soyuz sizzle, no mumbling. It's articulate, but very flattering. Something with my voice that is so extremely compatible with it. And I've always thought that one of the reasons why it sounds so good on my voice is because, from what I understand, you're the golden ears of Soyuz, and you probably use your voice as a testing ground a lot more than other voices.
Yeah.
And having a male voice, a calm male voice for testing, it's going to pinpoint these mumbling frequencies, which I always react very negatively to. Like if, these frequencies, when they're not contained, it just sounds so muddy, and it's very difficult to handle that with EQ. You can tone it down, but it's not the same thing as having a real microphone capture it in a flattering way from the start.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Well, it's great to hear.
Yeah.
Thanks you, Cuckoo. It's wonderful to hear. It's funny, I'll share just a little funny story about our setup. Our capsule master is named Vladimir, and he's an absolute genius. And he was trained by a guy named Alexander, who was from a technical institute in Moscow, who's like just a legendary capsule engineer. And when we first developed the 17 tube, we sent it to different people, to Nigel Godrich, to Al Schmidt, different people. And Nigel just freaked out and loved it so much. And I said, Nigel, listen, he wanted to buy 2 of them. and I said, okay, please send me back the one that you tested, and then we'll send you a new pair. So we used that as our reference mic as for the 17, and Vladimir's way of testing each mic that goes out, each 17, is he sings this old folk song very softly with headphones on into the original one and then into the one that he's testing, back and forth like that. And I'm a real believer that you have to test with your ears at the end of the day. Like, you can look at charts and whatnot, but at the end of the day, that's what the end result's going to be. So that's what the process should also be. Let's end things off with some rapid fire questions based on your synth expertise. Are you ready?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. What would you say is the best all-purpose synth that works in a variety of situations?
Dang, that's impossible. I think it needs to be kind of divided up to a couple of categories.
Okay.
Like the OP1 field is for me like the king of portable all-rounder. You have it with you, and you can make a lot of stuff with just the OP1 field. And the reason why I say field and not the OP1 original is because the sound quality of the field is heavily updated compared to the original. So it sounds much more refined, much more mature. It sounds very, very good. And that would be like the king of the portable all-rounder. Then we have, as a gig keyboard player, you would like a synth that can make a variety of great synth sounds, but also that could play samples, because maybe you're playing keys for a band that has a specific sound, and you make a sample library that you need to play with, but also have like synth layers inside of it. And I would say that the Norway 2 would fit really nicely into there. Nord, they're making very easy to use, elegant synths, and the Norway 2 has a really super nice keybed. So as a touring musician, having a nice keybed is very, very important, I think. And also, you can layer out, you can make layers and specific samples on specific keys and stuff. Yeah,
perfect.
It's something I really enjoy. But then there is in between there, we have the sequencer-based synths, which I am a big fan of. And I think a sequencer-based performance synth, the one that I'm digging right now is the Digitone from Electron. It's an FM synthesizer with the same kind of sound concept as a Sega Mega Drive. So the Digitone is something I truly enjoy. It has a wacky sound, but I'm performing with the Digitone alone, and it's super fun. So for me, like that a great sequencer is something that I truly enjoy to compose and produce and perform with.
Okay, fantastic. You heard it here, straight from the mouth of Cuckoo. And now, your top 2 monophonic synths.
Ooh, monophonic. I feel like most of the stuff that I have is polyphonic and modern. But from what I have, I think the Matriarch by Moog is the coolest monophonic. It is paraphonic, but it's up to you to make use of that. It is a monophonic signal flow, but you can kind of split it up in some various ways. And I think that's a really cool platform to be super creative with. Another monophonic synth that I haven't used much, but I have it, and I think it sounds much better than what you would like to think, is the Bass Station 2 by Novation. It's just a super nice sounding monophonic synth. They made a different version of maybe not the exact same thing, but it's what's it called again? Monostation, I think, or something. that is not in production anymore, which was really cool too. But the bass station too sounds great.
Perfect. Now, best drum synthesizer.
Ooh, I think I would have to go with, from experience, the analog rhythm from Electron. It's very versatile. You can mix in both samples and analog drum synthesis, and it's so rich. So you can also make full performances with only that, and be creative with how you work with samples and analog synthesis.
Okay, I think I know, but most innovative hardware synth company.
Yeah. I think I would like to say Teenage Engineering, because I think they don't care about what people would think. They just go for their dream. It's like, all right, we want to make this insanely well constructed, super well designed thing, and then they just go for it. And I think, from what I understand, they encourage everyone in the team to do their best. And
I would agree. I would also do a shout out to SOMA though, because they created a thing that all it does is pick up radio frequencies and electromagnetic frequency. They also seem like they don't design to try to match any trends. They just make weird, cool shit.
But I think also that you should, it's very difficult to pick one. You can kind of divide it up into best forward thinking or best design, but also then it comes to sheer sound quality. And I would really like to highlight Expressive E and Haken Audio, because sound quality and the sound design is something completely different from everyone else. It's really, really special sound that they can produce.
What about the most impressive soft synth?
I think there's a lot of super ambitious synths, and a lot of them are very impressive. Like there is physical modeling pianos that are really impressive. But I think maybe from a personal preference, I'll go back to Plogue, because if you check out their videos, they're calling their whole, everything that they're doing is a preservation project. They want to preserve the old sounds. And, when all the chips are gone, you can't make these sounds anymore. So they want to preserve that sound and make sure that we can still make the sounds. And there's something about the painstaking route that they take in order to map everything out of the hardware, and then come up with truly, truly precise algorithm to recreate. So I would like to make a shout out to them.
Yeah, we'll definitely put a link in the description to Plogue. I'm very curious to check them out as well. Most unconventional / quirky yet functional synth.
I would say there is a smaller company, maybe just one person, I'm not entirely sure, maybe two, that's called Twisted Electron. And they have recently made a smaller synth called Blast Beats. And it's a synth based on a chip found in an older audio card called a Sound Blaster from PCs from the 90s. And that machine, I can show you, I'm looking at it right now. Where is it? Right here somewhere. So this is a Blast Beats, and it's a sequencer, sort of. You could kind of compare it to the Digitone in that it is an FM synthesizer, but it is based on that chip, which has a lot of limitations, but also a lot of character, so much character. So it's super fun to work with something like this. and also to work with those hardware limitations, and maybe the way it's switching between waveforms is kind of a little bit glitchy, and yeah, very functional, very limited, and I love that I'm doing this.
Awesome. Most impressive synth of the 90s?
Oh, the 90s. I think even though I'm a real synth nerd, I'm not like a...
You're bad with dates, like me.
I'm bad with dates, yeah. But I'm not a collector of old gear.
Yeah, sure.
So I don't really know everything from back then, but I could highlight like my first actual synth, which is the Korg M1. It's not impressive, but when I chose my first synth, I went to the music store, tried everything in the stores, and I was thinking, which one is the one for me? And all the time came back to the Korg M1. And it was because of the sequencer. It has an onboard 8-track, was it 8? I think 6 or 8-track sequencer, and where I could play my own and record my own little adventure musics. And that really impressed me back then, that it had a really nice real-time sequencer on board. But sound-wise, maybe not the most impressive. I heard a lot of cool other stuff.
Well, Cuckoo, this has just been a real pleasure for me, man. I appreciate you taking the time, and you're always welcome here in Barcelona at my studio. And yeah, man, you're just one of my favorite people to chat with and eat sushi with, and just hang out with. You have a very calming and pleasant personality, and I really respect everything that you're doing.
Thank you so much. That's very kind of you. Without you, there wouldn't be a Soyuz, and I'm really happy we got to meet, and I really appreciate all the stuff that you're doing.
Thanks, man. Well, thank you for joining, everybody. If you've liked this video, consider subscribing to the channel, giving it a thumbs up. And as I said, we're going to put all the links in the description for Cuckoo's music, obviously for his YouTube channel, for all the gear that we talked about, and who knows, maybe a few other things we touched on. It was a great conversation. And we'll see you next week with another episode. If there's anyone you'd like to hear interviewed, feel free to list them in the comments, and we'll do our best to make it happen.